Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Seamus, why would the government want this information? It seems a lot of information to be collecting on every single Australian and their internet activity.
Yeah, I mean, their argument is that this would be similar to laws that are already in place in Europe, and that this is based on being able to combat terrorist activity, and that's sort of how it came to be in Europe. But I think one of the issues attached to that basic idea is that, of course, if you throw more hay on the haystack, then maybe it starts to get harder to find those needles.
Seamus, exactly what kind of data would they be interested in keeping?
This is the big question, of course, and this is why the Sydney Morning Herald kind of put out that Freedom of Information request to try to find that detail. And this is what's happened, is that we've not been told. Now, if we look at the European laws that are in place, they're sort of more based around when people have been accessing the internet, things like that. But some of the industry insiders here have actually been suggesting that they were asking for a lot more. They were asking for what is ultimately web browsing history. Now, while the government has denied that that's what they were asking for, it's ultimately a technicality that they're arguing, because if they're looking for like IP addresses, which basically means you can still find out exactly what websites people have been going to.
Here's a question. How many emails did you deal with today? 10, 20, maybe more? Now multiply your answer times every American who's online. It's estimated that people in this country send billions of emails each day. True, a lot of emails are junk, but others hold our innermost thoughts. They share intimacies, our complaints, or maybe our political opinions. And if you think your emails are private, prepare to watch and learn about a number of cases that each raise questions about how the government may be going through electronic mail. There is evidence the government has been intercepting most emails as part of its terrorist surveillance program. That program has been criticized as illegal because it's missing an important ingredient: search warrants.
Your emails and my emails and everybody else's emails were evidently going to a government room. The issue...
James Brosnahan is an attorney. He represents this man, Mark Klein. For 22 years, Klein worked as a technician for the largest telecommunications company in America, AT&T. Several years ago, Klein says he came to suspect that AT&T had installed secret computer gear designed to spy on internet traffic at the request of the National Security Agency, or NSA. AT&T handles tens of millions of emails a day, not just for its own subscribers, but for other internet companies too. Upset by what he saw, Klein decided to blow the whistle.
I've been struggling for some months now to bring it out into the light of day, and that's all really that I want to do, is bring it out there so that people can examine it and decide for themselves.
Well, the president's been very aggressive about we're only listening to people talking to Al-Qaeda. What the administration has failed to explain is, if that's the case, why didn't you get a warrant when you need a warrant in the United States? Or if you're doing it overseas, you don't need a warrant. So it leaves a lot of suspicion that what's been reported in the paper is in fact true, which is that the program's much wider than that.
So it's not just, at least the criticism from the civil liberties standpoint, for one, is that apparently what the government has acknowledged is happening is not the only thing that's happening, because if that were it, it would be very simple for them to have complied with.
Well, we keep hearing these kind of code phrases, you know, from the Attorney General and the other apologists for this program, which suggests that in fact all they want you to think they're doing is going after Al-Qaeda, but the reality is they also are saying, you know, that we may be doing more, but we can't acknowledge that because it's highly classified. We don't admit that we're doing more, but we don't rule it out. In fact, I think the Attorney General said recently we're not going to rule out the idea that we're doing surveillance entirely within the United States, without a connection overseas. So what's visible now, or what we believe is visible now, is maybe only the smallest part of a very large program.
Top secret America. That's the title of an explosive investigative series published in the Washington Post this morning that's already creating a firestorm on Capitol Hill. It starts, quote, "The top secret world the government created in response to the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001 has become so large, so unwieldy, and so secretive that no one knows how much money it costs, how many people it employs, how many programs exist within it, or exactly how many agencies do the same work." Some of the findings of the 2-year investigation include more than 1,200 government organizations and nearly 2,000 private companies work on programs related to counterterrorism, homeland security, and intelligence in about 10,000 locations across the United States. An estimated 854,000 people, nearly 1.5 times as many as live in Washington, D.C., hold top-secret security clearances. Many security and intelligence agencies do the same work, creating redundancy and waste. The series by Washington Post reporters Dana Priest and Bill Arkin includes an online searchable database and locator map. PBS Frontline is producing an hour-long documentary on the investigation that'll run in October. This is its trailer.
You think you know America, but you don't know top secret America. We're all aware that there are 3 branches of government in the United States. But in response to 9/11, a 4th branch has emerged. It is protected from public scrutiny by extraordinary secrecy. Top secret America.
This is a closed community, and since 9/11, it's become even more so.
The money spigot was just opened after 9/11, and nobody dared say, I don't think we should be spending that much.
It has become so big, and the lines of responsibility are so blurred that even our nation's leaders don't have a handle on it. Where is it? It's being built from coast to coast, hidden within some of America's most familiar cities and neighborhoods. In Colorado, in Nebraska, in Texas, in Florida, in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Top Secret America includes hundreds of federal departments and agencies operating out of 1,300 facilities around this country. They contract the services of nearly 2,000 companies. In all, more people than live in our nation's capital have top secret security clearance.
It's, again, the size, the lack of transparency, and the cost. And if we don't get it right, the consequences are gigantic.
Well, first of all, let me say that with all due respect to the Washington Post, and Dana Priest and Bill Arkin are very good reporters, we have to ask, why did it take them 7 years to do this story? Anyone who's been covering intelligence or national security in Washington knows that intelligence has been privatized to an incredible extent, and national security has been privatized to an incredible extent. I broke the first stories on the intelligence industrial complex. The first one appeared in Mother Jones in 2005. In 2007, I wrote a major story for Salon and a whole series in Salon. I disclosed that 70% of the U.S. intelligence budget is spent on private sector contractors, and then, of course, I wrote this book, which has a lot of this information that's in the Post series. So I find it rather amazing that it took them this long to actually do this kind of piece, because the information has been there, and the American people have been ill-served by the Washington Post, whose coverage of these companies has been basically rah-rah journalism, rah-rah Lockheed Martin, rah-rah Booz Allen, look at the profits they're making. There has not been this kind of careful look at what's actually happening. So that's the first point I'd like to make. And I think, you know, people should look at the work of myself, Jeremy Scahill, other journalists that have covered this sector, and put out the word of how much intelligence is controlled and gathered by private sector corporations.
In one of the operations that I was in, we looked at organizations just supposedly so that we would not target them, so that we knew where they were as not to have a problem with them. Mm-hmm. Now, what I was finding out, though, is that the collection on those organizations was 24/7, and 365 days a year, and It made no sense, and I started to investigate that. That's about the time when they came after me to fire me. But an organization that was collected on were U.S. News organizations and reporters and journalists.
To what purpose? I mean, is there a file somewhere full of every email sent by all the reporters at the New York Times? Is there a recording somewhere of every conversation I had with my little nephew in upstate New York? Is it like that?
If it was involved in this specific avenue of collection, it would be everything, yes. It would be everything.
Surveillance is an important component of law enforcement work, and the Nighthawk is a miniature spy plane that offers law enforcement the capacity to spy on a subject from the air. The Skyseer is another promising spy tool. This kite-like device can spy on a subject for an hour at an altitude of 200 or more feet, where it's hardly visible, all the while streaming video to a computer or laptop as it flies. Unlike the Nighthawk, which was developed by the military for the military, the Skyseer was developed specifically for law enforcement and could be ready for prime time soon. The pole cam is simply a wireless camera attached to a pole. A simple but potentially life-saving device, it has the ability to allow police to peek around corners, survey the inside of a building before entering, or see what's on a rooftop without exposing themselves to danger. And finally, the Dragon Egg. This egg-shaped camera can be thrown through windows screens, and over fences. It always lands upright and streams 360 degrees of simultaneous video coverage back to the computer. It's another way police can find out what's on the other side of a wall or inside of a building without risking their lives. These are just a few of the many technologies that could find their way into the hands of local law enforcement sometime soon.
Local 2 investigates the secret aircraft the Houston Police Department is now testing. It's a new unmanned drone that can patrol from the air. Now, it's also a device that HPD wanted to keep under wraps. And now they're being just a little vague at how they're going to use it. KPRC Local 2 investigative reporter Stephen Dean gives you the first look at the plane that could soon be watching you from above.
Neighbors accustomed to livestock and wide-open land had no idea what to make of all this. Black trucks, satellite dishes, a radar swirling, and a portable launch pad with something covered up. At the entrance to this Waller County ranch was a Houston police roadblock, checking all the dignitaries arriving for this secret test. Their invitation spelled out no media allowed. We tried to ask this HPD lieutenant on his way back out.
They'll be coming out here in a minute.
They all gathered around the launch pad, big shots with police departments from all over the Houston area. And now, the show they came for, the test you were not supposed to see.
IP addresses, which basically means you can still find out exactly what websites people have been going to.
Here's a question. How many emails did you deal with today? 10, 20, maybe more? Now multiply your answer times every American who's online. It's estimated that people in this country send billions of emails each day. True, a lot of emails.
Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Seamus, why would the government want this information? It seems a lot of information to be collecting on every single Australian and their internet activity.
Yeah, I mean, their argument is that this would be similar to laws that are already in place in Europe, and that this is based on being able to combat terrorist activity, and that's sort of how it came to be in Europe. But I think
are junk, but others hold our innermost thoughts. They share intimacies, our complaints, or maybe our political opinions. And if you think your emails are private, prepare to watch and learn about a number of cases that each raise questions about how the government may be going through electronic mail. There is evidence.
European laws that are in place, they're sort of more based around when people have been accessing the internet, things like that. But some of the industry insiders here have actually been suggesting that that they were asking for a lot more. They were asking for what is ultimately web browsing history. Now, while the government has denied that that's what they were asking for, it's ultimately a technicality that they're arguing, because if they're looking for, like, one of the issues attached to that basic idea is that, of course, if you throw more hay on the haystack, then maybe it starts to get harder to find those needles.
Seamus, exactly what kind of data would they be interested in keeping?
This is the big question, of course, and this is why the Sydney Morning Herald kind of put out that Freedom of Information request to try to find that detail. And this is what's happened, is that we've not been told. Now, if we look at the